My father-in-law is refusing to let my daughter's boyfriend, who lives with her and is considered family by us, stay in his home over the holidays for reasons we didn't initially understand. It's creating a lot of tension and threatening to ruin Christmas. For some background, our 23-year-old daughter and her boyfriend Dan, who is 24, moved in together this past August. It felt quick. They had only been dating for 6 months at that point. However, they're both adults, fully capable of making their own decisions, and they've already begun discussing marriage. I genuinely believe they're going to spend their lives together. Dan recently had to relocate for a training program, so they're temporarily long distance, but they plan to live together again as soon as they're in the same city. Now my father-in-law can be a lot. He's a typical wealthy older man accustomed to having his opinions treated as commands. He and my mother-in-law visited our daughter in November, and for some inexplicable reason my father-in-law took an intense, immediate dislike to Dan. He offered no explanation. He simply decided he didn't like him. Personally, I wondered if it was because they moved in together so quickly, or perhaps because Dan is a person of color. Our family is white, but my father-in-law would never admit to any prejudice. This is where things get complicated. Dan will be spending Christmas with our immediate family at our house. His own parents are traveling, so he would have been alone. Of course, we invited him to stay with us. As far as we're concerned, he is going to be family and we treat him accordingly. My in-laws live about 2 hours away. Our usual holiday tradition includes an overnight visit at their house. We were still planning on that when we invited Dan. My partner was on the phone with his father, finalizing details, and mentioned that Dan would be staying with us for the holidays. My partner was very careful, stating he understood it was his parents' decision whether to include Dan in their plans. Honestly, it never even crossed my mind that they would exclude him. Well, my father-in-law threw a fit. He said he didn't want that boy, Dan is 24, in his house. He didn't discuss it with his wife, who actually likes Dan. He just flat out refused. My partner, and I am incredibly proud of him for this, stood his ground. He told his father that Dan would be staying with us and would be part of our holiday plans. He agreed that, of course, his dad had the right to decide who was in his home and wasn't going to argue that point. He suggested his parents discuss it privately before making a final decision. Then he offered an alternative. If his father truly didn't want Dan in the house, we could all meet for lunch or dinner at a restaurant halfway between our homes, with Dan included. It did not go well. My father-in-law immediately became defensive and snapped about it being his house and his choice, and that he didn't need to consult his wife. His word was final. He's that kind of guy. The ironic part to me is that my in-laws are devout Christians, so much for the season of love and acceptance. My current dilemma is how to handle this with our daughter and Dan. I am furious and disgusted by my father-in-law's behavior. If it were solely up to me, I would tell her exactly what her grandfather said, that Dan isn't welcome. But my partner would rather just say the overnight visit didn't work out to spare her feelings and prevent conflict with her grandparents. I disagree. I believe she deserves the truth and has a right to be angry if she chooses to be. I know I am. So my question is this: how would you address it with your adult daughter? Personally, I don't mind if she gets angry upon hearing the truth, but these aren't my parents and I want to respect my partner's wishes as well. What would you do? Top comments from the original post. Commenter 1. If she is adult enough to live with her partner, she is adult enough to hear the truth about what her grandfather said. An added benefit is that she will be better prepared for any future fallout from your father-in-law if they get engaged or married. Don't embellish. Just present the facts. Her grandfather has indicated he doesn't want Dan to join the family Christmas at his house. Therefore, you aren't going there and are trying to arrange a neutral meetup. Once a decision is made, you'll update her and Dan. Commenter 2. Exactly. Your daughter has a right to know how her grandpa feels about her partner. Has your husband spoken to his mother? Does she get a say? Your daughter will have many decisions to make going forward regarding her grandfather's involvement in major life events, weddings, christenings, relationships with future children if she stays with Dan. My response to comments: no, my husband hasn't talked to his mom yet. Unfortunately, she tends to publicly support her husband's decisions but disagrees in private. I'm hoping she's working on him behind the scenes, but as it's my husband's family, I'm not comfortable going around him to talk to her. We generally operate on a your parents, you handle it system. Commenter 3. It's really concerning that your partner doesn't respect his own adult daughter enough to tell her the truth about something that directly involves her. He seems more concerned with protecting his father's reputation. I would tell your partner that she is going to hear the truth from one of you by the end of the day, so he'd better decide which one. My response: my partner says he's protecting her by withholding the full truth. His plan is to just say the overnight didn't work out. I know my daughter will ask why, and at that point it will all come out anyway. That's precisely why I want to tell her proactively. An edit to my original post: my partner and I are married, I just tend to call him my partner. Also, I should add that my father-in-law refers to my white brother-in-law as that boy as well. That's part of why I'm no longer entirely sure his dislike is race-related. We've decided we are not going to the in-laws' house even if my father-in-law changes his mind. A lunch meetup is still being debated. Update 2 days later. I've received many more responses than I anticipated, so I thought I should provide an update. Since my original post, I've had several conversations with my husband, none of which have gone particularly well. I've explained that I'm not comfortable with the lie of omission, merely saying the date didn't work out. I feel our daughter should be told the real reason and should be encouraged to ask her grandfather directly why we won't be visiting. My husband still disagrees. He maintains he is protecting her. I continue to argue that he is protecting his father and in doing so is rewarding his bad behavior. He counters that the consequence is my in-laws missing our overnight visit. I finally told him I will not lie to our daughter. If she asks me why we aren't going, I will tell her she needs to speak with her grandfather about that. He can explain his own decision. While part of me wants to simply say, Grandpa said Dan isn't welcome, I refuse to do his dirty work for him. Frankly, I'm going to ensure she asks me because I am not okay with her and Dan attending a lunch with someone who disapproves of him. Whatever my father-in-law's reasoning, she has a right to know and he has a responsibility to tell her himself. Then she can make an informed choice about whether to attend, and to be completely honest, if they choose not to go, I won't go either. She needs to know I support her unconditionally. Right now, things are icy between my husband and me. I have no idea how this will resolve. I'll update again when there's more information. Top comments on the update. Commenter 1, you are correct that your husband is protecting his father, not his daughter, and that is going to be a much bigger long-term problem. It's possible your husband privately agrees with his father, which is why he's protecting him. You need to get to the bottom of why your husband is taking this stance. If it turns out he shares these prejudiced views, that will have massive ramifications for your marriage and family. Don't wait for your daughter to ask. She's a grown-up. Give her the respect of telling her outright what is happening. Let the chips fall where they may. Commenter 2, upon reading the update, is there a racial component to this? Upon rereading the original post where I mentioned Dan is a person of color, yeah, your daughter needs to know her grandpa is being prejudiced. Dan doesn't need to be anywhere near that man, and your husband might be too. Second update 1 day later. My mind is still reeling from the number of people who have read these posts, over 1 million. I never imagined so many would be invested in this slice of family drama. I'm still getting many messages, so here's what has happened in the last day. I haven't spoken to my daughter yet. We were supposed to talk yesterday but couldn't connect, so that conversation is pending. However, I did talk to my husband again. We delved much deeper into his perspective, and I have to say I was surprised. He is more upset about the situation than I realized. He is genuinely angry with his father. The fact that his father rejected Dan for no apparent reason infuriates him. He confirmed that he himself likes Dan and doesn't understand his father's behavior. So no, my husband does not share his father's apparent views. My husband talked about how difficult it has been all his life to act as the mediator in his family. As many commenters suspected, this is a role he has played for decades. He has always been the one to smooth things over between his parents, between his siblings and parents, and even between his parents and me. His family is extremely conflict-averse, and somehow he assumed the responsibility for minimizing tension. He hates it but feels trapped. I knew this dynamic existed but didn't grasp its full extent. Our conversation was painful but cathartic, and I think we both felt better afterward. But that's not the main update. Apparently, after our last talk, my husband spoke to his father again. I know many of you were ready to declare my father-in-law a racist. I'm sorry to disappoint, but that isn't the core issue. And no, Dan is not some con artist who said something awful. My father-in-law is, in his words, a grumpy old man who thinks young people shouldn't be living in sin. That's a direct quote. Before anyone suggests he's lying, which I considered, my husband asked him directly if Dan's race was a factor. When I first raised this possibility, my husband didn't think so but wasn't completely sure. Well, my father-in-law was apparently horrified by the question. He asked my husband if he had ever said or done anything to give us that impression. When we discussed it later, neither of us could pinpoint anything specific beyond the "that boy" comment. As I mentioned in my posts, he uses that phrase for my white brother-in-law too. That suspicion was mine and I take full responsibility for it. I place too much emphasis on that phrase, assuming a racist intent where there may not have been one. I feel terrible about it and have apologized to my husband. I will also apologize to my father-in-law. During their conversation, my father-in-law even offered to speak to Dan and our daughter directly if they thought this. My husband explained that it was we who had suspected racial motivation. His father is understandably upset that we could think that of him. I have some damage control to do and will be calling him to apologize. So back to the real reason. He does not approve of Dan and our daughter living together without being engaged or married. He thinks they're too young, it was too fast, and it's not appropriate. As devout Christians, the concept of living in sin is very real to them. As an extension, he thought Dan was freeloading, as Dan was between jobs using his savings when they visited. He didn't know Dan was awaiting the start of a full-time vocational program. Does he approve of Dan now? No, he's still stuck on the cohabitation issue. Is he willing to host Dan overnight? Also no, he still disapproves of their choices. Is he a racist jerk? No, he is just an old-fashioned 80-year-old man who doesn't understand the world has changed. That's where we stand. We are still not going to their house for Christmas. Dan is still not welcome for an overnight stay, but now we know why. As for what will tell our daughter the truth, that her grandfather isn't comfortable having Dan stay overnight since they aren't engaged, that it's his house and his rule, that we must respect that, and that we are going to try for a lunch meetup instead. She and Dan are welcome to join us and we'll let them decide. I will suggest she speak to her grandfather directly if she wishes. I don't know if I'll update again. It depends on how the conversations with my daughter and father-in-law go. Thanks, everyone, for reading. Top comments on the second update. Commenter 1, I've been following since your first post, and I'm really relieved the old man's problem is old-fashioned prudishness instead of racism. I see why the boy comment led you there, but the fact he uses it for your white brother-in-law too makes sense. It's an unfortunate verbal habit some older men have. It's not kind, but it isn't necessarily racist. I'm also glad you and your husband talked. This is the kind of misunderstanding that can tear families apart. I hope your talks go well. Commenter 2, did you and your husband not live together before marriage? It's his house, but I smell some hypocrisy. I agree with everyone saying to stop lying to your daughter. My response, we did live together. We moved in together after 4 months, got engaged a year later, and married a year after that. We were not allowed to share a room at my in-laws' house until we were married. This attitude is not new from him. I was just surprised it remained so strong after nearly 30 years. And we are telling her the truth, as stated above. Commenter 3, so if they get married, will he finally approve of Dan? My response, I don't know. I hope if he's around that long, he'll get to know Dan and see what a great guy he is. It would be nice for our daughter to have his approval, but frankly, she's never needed anyone's permission to live her life. I'm very proud of her for that. Third and final update, 13 hours later. This will be the final update in what I'm calling the Great Christmas In-Law Invite Debacle. First, the conversation with my father-in-law. It was short and mostly cordial. I apologized for assuming that boy comment was racially motivated. I explained that the term is often considered a derogatory slur when used toward people of color, which prompted my reaction. He grudgingly accepted my apology. He pointed out again that he calls my white brother-in-law the same thing and never meant it as anything other than a reference to a younger man. As a few commenters suggested, I pointed out that even if he didn't intend it as an insult, it could still be received as one. He sounded surprised and asked if I thought my brother-in-law was offended. I asked if he'd ever called him that to his face. He went very quiet. I mentioned that if he didn't think it was insulting, why wouldn't he say it openly? He harumphed and muttered about people being too sensitive, but I think he understood the point. We moved on. I then asked if Dan was welcome in his house at all or just not overnight. That seemed to surprise him. He said, of course he can visit, just not sleep over. That was a relief. He then remarked that we had jumped to suggesting a lunch so quickly that he never had a chance to propose a daytime visit instead. Talk about a miscommunication. The call ended with us agreeing that meeting at a neutral restaurant this year was for the best and we would plan better for next year. If Dan's still around, he felt the need to add, but he finished by saying he missed us and was looking forward to lunch. So that bridge is mended. Then came the talk with our daughter. She brought up the visit herself, asking when we were going to her grandparents'. Her dad and I had agreed on our response. We were meeting them halfway for lunch instead. She was disappointed and asked why. As gently as possible, I told her that not everyone is comfortable having someone they don't know very well stay in their home. Before I could elaborate, she made me laugh by asking, does Grandpa still have a stick up his butt about me and Dan living together? Everyone who said she already knew was absolutely right. We shared a laugh about old-fashioned values and how not everyone thinks the way we do. We talked about how people can react when a relationship moves quickly. Her own father's and my relationship did too, and that attitudes can change with time as people get to know each other. I told her I wasn't invited to sleep over at her grandparents until her dad and I were engaged, which seemed to help. She laughed and said, at least he's consistent. I reiterated that her dad and I support her and Dan 100%. She said she knew that and appreciated it, and that was basically it. I'm sure some people will be disappointed there wasn't a dramatic, explosive confrontation ending with us cutting my father-in-law out of our lives for being a secret bigot. But that's not real life, at least not this time. There was a misunderstanding, a major miscommunication, and some judgmental attitudes from both my father-in-law and from me. We are still going to see my in-laws. Dan will be there, it just won't be an overnight stay. Things are okay with us and our daughter, and things are okay between us and my father-in-law. Their personal relationship is for them to navigate. This is the final update because the issue is resolved. Thanks again to everyone who commented. Yes, even those who told me to divorce my bigot husband. That gave me a wry chuckle. I received some truly great advice. Reading all the responses has been an experience. So cheers, and that's all, folks. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Top comments on the final update. Commenter 1, thank you for the update. This is the best possible ending and it was wonderful to read. Have a wonderful holiday with your family. Commenter 2, just now joining the story. Wow, what a journey. I understand this family issue very well. My 90-plus-year-old father is one of the most accepting people, but he draws a hard line at cohabitation before marriage. No wedding present, no attendance. In his mind, if you play at being married, he won't act as if everything is normal. He values the sanctity of marriage intensely and cannot condone anything else. Families are complicated.